Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Midnight Murmurs tonight. I'll be your storyteller, guiding you through chilling accounts that were never meant to be uncovered. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe for more true horror stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. Because once you hear these stories, you might never look at the dark the same way again. I don't even remember applying for the job. The email just appeared in my inbox one morning. Subject line: urgent, personnel needed for remote ranger station. The message was short, sterile, like a form letter. No park name, no signature, just a set of coordinates and a government seal that looked half faded. Maybe I was desperate for a change. Maybe I should have deleted it. But something pulled me in. Curiosity, maybe, or something else entirely. I drove for hours past the last known road, following the GPS until even that gave up and blinked out. The forest stretched around me like it was holding its breath, dense, towering pines swallowing the sky. No signs, no markers, no welcome gate. Just a narrow gravel path leading into nowhere. When I stepped out of my truck, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses in on you like the woods are waiting, watching. No wind, no birds, just stillness. I walked a few feet down the trail and paused. Something felt off, like the horizon had shifted. And then I saw it. Just for a second. The trees moved. I should have known something was wrong the moment the trees shifted behind me. Caldwell was already waiting when I arrived at the station. Late 50s, sun-leathered skin, grizzled beard. He looked like he'd been carved from the forest itself. Didn't offer a handshake, just gave a nod and motioned for me to follow. "Don't wander," he said, "gravel trail only. If it's dirt, don't trust it. And at night, no matter what you hear, stay inside. You hear me?" I thought he was just being dramatic, part of the whole spooky wilderness act. But he didn't blink when he said it, didn't crack a smile, just stared like he expected me to ignore him and regret it. The station was rustic, almost too perfect, like someone built it from memory rather than blueprints. No radios, no Wi-Fi. My phone had zero service, and when I tried to drop a pin on my location, the map glitched out and spun in place. The trails were weirder. I'd mark where they branched off, but the next day those trails were gone. Or worse, they led somewhere else. One had a deer track that ended mid-step in the mud, like the creature had been lifted clean off the ground. I started keeping notes. Distances. Directions. It didn't help. Then came the clearing. I found it just past the edge of where the gravel thinned. A perfect circle scorched into the forest floor. The ground blackened like it had been hit by lightning, but there were no charred trees, no fire damage beyond the ring. Right in the center sat a ranger's hat. Old, sun-bleached. I brought it back to Caldwell. His eyes darkened. "Where'd you find this?" 12 minutes east, just past the ridge. "There's nothing out there," he said quickly, almost too quickly. "No one else is assigned to this forest. No one's been here in years." I waited for him to offer an explanation. He didn't. Just took the hat and walked out of the room like he needed to be anywhere else. That night, I checked my notebook. I'd marked the clearing. I knew I had. But now the page was blank, just smeared graphite and a faint circular stain where I'd written it down. The forest didn't want to be remembered. The first whisper came around 2:17 a.m. I remember because I'd just turned off the lantern and was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the suffocating quiet. It wasn't wind, wasn't trees creaking. It was a voice. Just a single word I couldn't quite catch, like it had been spoken too close to my ear to make sense. The second night, there were footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling the cabin in uneven loops. I stayed frozen in bed, heart hammering. Caldwell was in the next room, supposedly asleep, but I heard the click of a safety being switched off. He was awake, listening too. The third night, something tapped on the window. Not like a branch brushing it. No, this was rhythmic, intentional. 3 taps, then silence, then 3 more. I finally got up, pressed my face to the glass, and saw nothing but black trees staring back. Caldwell stopped pretending after that. He started pacing the lodge with his old hunting rifle, eyes sunken, whispering to himself. They're getting closer. They always do this when the forest chooses. When I asked what he meant, he just looked at me like I wouldn't understand, or maybe like I would too soon. It was during one of his patrols that I found the logbook. The floorboard in my room creaked oddly when I stepped on it. Beneath it was a rotting leather-bound journal, initials burned into the corner. JT. I didn't recognize the name. The entries started normal. Trail observations, weather notes. Then things got stranger. Mentions of voices that echoed names no one had spoken. Glimpses of movement between the trees. Dreams of being watched. One entry described a smiling man outside the station, who looked just like the ranger himself. The last sentence cut off mid-word. It knows I'm not the real. That night the banging started, not tapping, not footsteps. Banging, like fists or rocks slamming against the front door with violent desperation. Caldwell stood in the hallway, rifle aimed, whispering over and over, "That's not a person. That's not a person. That's not a person." I ignored him and looked through the peephole. Standing in the dark, inches from the door, was me. Same jacket, same eyes, same face, smiling like it knew something I didn't. By morning, curiosity was stronger than fear. Caldwell had vanished into one of his restless patrols, muttering to himself, and I couldn't take the not knowing anymore. The gravel trail stretched behind the cabin like a lifeline, but just a few yards beyond it, I saw something new. A narrow dirt path I swore hadn't been there the day before. It cut into the woods like a wound. Against every warning, I stepped onto it. The air changed instantly. The silence grew heavier, thicker, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. I tried to keep track of landmarks, fallen logs, clusters of moss, but they shifted when I turned my head. A tree with a lightning scar appeared twice, though I hadn't doubled back. The trail was folding in on itself, dragging me deeper no matter how many times I tried to turn around. Then I saw it. Another ranger station, sagging and rotted, tucked between leaning pines. It looked exactly like ours. Same windows, same porch, even the same crooked roof beam. But it had been left to decay for decades. My stomach tightened as I pushed the door open. The smell of mildew and ash choked me. On the desk lay a notebook. My notebook. The same black cover, the same creased corners. But when I opened it, the entries were dated 20 years ago, and the handwriting was mine. The pages were frantic, filled with scrawled warnings. Please. A record of days looping endlessly, of faces outside the windows, and then in faded ink. It wears you until nothing's left. Don't let it take your name. Voices rose around me, faint but desperate, weaving through the walls. Help us. We can't leave. It keeps us here. One voice, clearer than the rest, whispered right against my ear. Run. Don't let it take your name. I bolted, crashing through the undergrowth, tripping, clawing at branches. Somehow, without memory of turning, I burst back onto the gravel outside my cabin. But something was wrong. The door hung half open. Inside, the walls were gouged with claw marks deep enough to splinter wood. Caldwell was gone. His rifle lay abandoned on the floor, and the silence was no longer empty. It felt hungry. I tore through every drawer, every cupboard, desperate for Caldwell, desperate for proof that I wasn't losing my mind. In the corner sat the old radio, dust-caked but intact. I slammed the dial, twisting through static until my knuckles hurt. This is Ranger Outpost 17, requesting immediate assistance. Is anyone there? For a moment, only white noise. Then, through the hiss, a voice. My own voice. Whispering. You're already part of it. The radio died with a sharp pop, smoke curling from the speaker. My hands shook. I wanted to leave, but every window showed only endless dark trees pressing closer than before. By nightfall, The forest found its new trick. Voices. Not random, not strangers. Voices I knew. My mother calling my name. Caldwell's gruff bark, demanding I let him in. And then the one that broke me. My brother's voice. My brother who'd been dead for 10 years. I staggered to the door, hand on the latch, tears burning in my eyes. His voice was right there, pleading, trembling. "Please, it's so cold out here, don't leave me." My fingers curled around the lock. One twist and I could let him in. One twist and maybe I wouldn't be alone anymore. But then my boot caught on something in the floor. A seam in the wood I'd never noticed. I pried it open, revealing a trap door. The stench hit me first, mildew and old rot. Inside, boxes filled with photographs. Dozens, maybe hundreds. All rangers. All different faces. Some black and white. Some decades old. And then I found mine. A photo of me stepping out of my truck at the trailhead, smiling nervously. Exactly how I had days ago, except the photo was dated a week before I'd arrived. The door creaked. My stomach dropped. This time there was no knock, no warning. The front door eased open, slow and deliberate, hinges groaning in protest. I froze, clutching the photo in my hand as a figure stepped inside. It was me. Same clothes, same tired eyes, except this version didn't blink, didn't breathe. And when it smiled, the skin around its mouth stretched too wide as though it wasn't used to wearing my face. I ran. I didn't care where. I just had to go. Grabbing the flashlight and the journal, I bolted into the woods, the trees swallowing me whole. The night air cut into my lungs, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The forest didn't look the same anymore. The trees, those towering ancient pines, shifted. Their bark stretched and twisted like they were breathing, growing, reshaping themselves as I ran. I couldn't remember which way I came from. Couldn't trust the path beneath my feet. Every time I thought I was getting further, I found myself back at the cabin, its shadow looming like it was waiting for me. Hours passed. Or was it days? The flashlight flickered and died, but I kept running. The sound of my footsteps, too many feet, echoed around me. The journal became heavier, but I clutched it as if it was the last shred of who I used to be. I'm standing outside again. My breath catches in my throat, not from running, but from seeing it. Me. But this time it's different. It looks confident, more human. And I can feel it. There's no space between us anymore. I've been here too long. If someone finds this, burn the forest. It's not a place. It's a mouth pretending to be one. Static. Every patrol, no matter where I start, I always end up there, at the same cursed campsite. Site 46. It's not marked on any of the new maps anymore, and it's been closed off for years. No one's supposed to go near it, not after what happened back in '97, but somehow, every single night shift, no matter the route I take, no matter how far I stray, I find myself standing at the edge of its fire pit, staring at the long dead coals like I was pulled there in my sleep. I've been a forest ranger for 13 years. I know these trails better than I know the roads back home. I can navigate blindfolded through fog and pitch-black night, track mountain lions by a single print, tell time by the curve of the moon. But lately the forest feels wrong. Familiar paths twist into dead ends. The wind carries voices. My radio dies in the same exact spot. And always, when my shift winds down, my boots crunch over the same pine needles, and there it is. Site 46, abandoned. Silent. Waiting. Something is pulling me there. Not physically. Worse, intimately, like it already knows me. And last night, I think it finally spoke. It started like any other patrol. Mid-October, clear skies just after sunset. I was running the northern perimeter trail, checking for fire hazards and illegal campers. The air was crisp, the kind of chill that settles deep in your bones but keeps you alert. I remember glancing at my GPS and thinking it was acting weird, jumping coordinates, flipping direction like it was drunk. I figured it was just the elevation or signal bounce. Happens sometimes. I kept going, but the trail signs were off. The turns felt too sharp, like the trail had shifted without warning. At first I thought I'd taken a wrong path near Bear Ridge, but when I passed that rusted-out ranger post, one that hadn't been used in decades, I felt that cold twist in my gut. And then I saw the clearing. Site 46, I froze. It shouldn't have been there. That site had been decommissioned after a solo hiker went missing, never found. I hadn't seen it in years, and yet, here it was like it had never left. I tried to play it cool, told myself the trails must have been rerouted, and my GPS was just catching up. But as I stepped closer, I noticed the fire pit. It wasn't old and buried in leaves like it should have been. There were fresh ashes inside, still warm. I scanned the area. No tents, no gear, just a torn flannel shirt hanging from a low branch, swaying like it had just been placed there. I radioed in, throat tight, static, tried again, nothing. I should have left then, I know that now. But I stepped closer like something was daring me to. I reached for the shirt, and that's when I heard it. My name. Whispered. Behind me. But not just whispered. Spoken in my own damn voice. I spun around. Heart hammering, flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing, just trees. Stillness. But I swear I heard breathing. My breathing, but not coming from me. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off the tree line. I didn't run, not yet, but something in that moment changed. Like a loop had just closed, and I'd stepped into something I wouldn't be able to walk back out of. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Subtly, but permanently. Every patrol after that blurred at the edges. Trails I'd walked 100 times suddenly veered in odd directions. Familiar tree clusters began to repeat like a broken film reel. And no matter where I started, North Gate, South Ridge, didn't matter. I always ended up back at Site 46 every single time. I started marking trees with orange tape, bringing physical maps, even tried dead reckoning under the stars. Nothing worked. The landmarks twisted. Streams ran uphill. And always, those damn ashes were fresh when I arrived. I started hearing faint voices long before I got there. They were low, hushed, almost rhythmic, like a lullaby played backward. I told myself it was wind in the branches. But the wind doesn't mimic human speech. It doesn't know your name. One night, determined to break the cycle, I stayed outside the main trails, bushwhacking through uncharted brush. I reached the eastern ridge, miles from the cursed campsite. Or so I thought. I crested the hill, and there it was. Site 46 waiting. Only this time something was buried under the old picnic table, just barely visible. I dug it out with my gloves. A half-rotted field notebook. Pages curled, soaked through in parts but legible. Someone, another ranger, had written in frantic scrawl, "It pulls you, changes the woods, can't tell time. Patrols loop," voices call. Something watches. I flipped through faster. Dates ranged back over 10 years. Each entry more panicked than the last. The final page simply read, "Don't let it speak your name." That's when I heard it again. My name. Not whispered this time. Spoken clearly, deliberately. I whipped my light upward. The voice had come from above. The canopy. My beam caught movement, something huge and fast pulling away through the leaves. Branches didn't snap. They retracted, and then, silence. The forest held its breath. So did I. I clutched the notebook, heart thudding against my ribs, and stepped back slowly, every part of me screaming to run. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just haunting the campsite, it was watching the entire forest, and now, it knew my name. I've heard the stories my whole life, the ranger tales told around a stove and then never again. The man in the yellow coat, they'd say, was a drifter who walked the park in storms until one winter he vanished. After that, the tale turned, a flash of yellow between trunks, a figure standing where no rain fell. I didn't give it weight. Then came a night of hard rain that made the pines hunch close and the trails melt away. I was on sweep, headlights cutting a tunnel, when the radio died and the truck coughed. I stepped into the downpour. My beam hit something at the edge of the fire pit, a yellow shape unmoving. For a moment I convinced myself it was a prank. I approached. He didn't move. There was no body when I reached the spot, only wet boot prints in mud, a ring that matched my own tracks and then spiraled away into the trees like someone had walked around me and melted into the dark. The whispers threaded the rain, too precise to be wind. My name, an old friend's name, a laugh that sounded like my own. The forest felt like it leaned in to listen. I sat in my truck all night watching the campsite, breathing with the windows fogged. In the pale morning, a Polaroid was tucked under my wiper. I pulled it free and saw myself asleep on the ground, jacket folded under my head, the fire pit behind me. At the edge of the frame, a smear of yellow blurred the light. I had no memory of sleeping. I drove back to the station with the photo on the seat and kept my mouth shut. Who do you tell when the proof is your own face captured by whatever is out there? The photograph lodged in me like a splinter. I thumbed its corner until the image warmed beneath my skin, and the world narrowed to the size of that square. I thought of the missing man from the station bulletin, the yellow coat in faded ink, and of campers who crossed the road to avoid that ridge. I drove home the long way, palms white on the wheel, rehearsing a story. Prank, misframe, fatigue. But rehearsal cracked quickly. The boot prints kept replaying, the ring of mud like a collar, and the rain felt as if it had been watching me sleep, and quietly. Obsession arrived like fog, slow, impossible to shake. I treated Site 46 like a case file. Cameras, motion sensors, trip lines, tape on trees, thumbtacks in the dirt. I staked out shifts alone, then doubled back with a partner who laughed until the batteries in his recorder steamed and died. I thought technology would catch what my eyes missed. It didn't. Footage corrupted into static the moment the frame hit the fire pit. Microphones recorded nothing but a low, hollow tone. Sleep stopped being a relief. I dreamed in fragments of smoke and wet wool. In those dreams, I was already at the campsite, sitting by a fire I did not remember building, watching a silhouette at the tree line. Each morning, my house felt too small and my maps too fragile. The Polaroid under my wiper, kept folded in a pocket, began to change. The smear of yellow shifted closer, a shoulder, then the suggestion of a face. I visited the missing hiker's family because obsession makes cowards bold. They lived in a trailer with wind chimes that never stopped. A woman with work-rough hands slid me a battered journal, pages brittle and scrawled in a trembling voice. "The forest is eating time," one line read. I saw another version of me. It smiled when I spoke. The handwriting curled like someone trying to hold words in place. After that, calling it a haunting felt small. Ghosts cling to memory. Predators adapt. This thing wasn't bound by sorrow. It studied rhythm and pattern until it could fold the world back on itself. It copied footsteps, lifted voices, learned my routes until my patrols became a map of returns. Every tree I marked later wore new bark. Every camera showed only static where something had been. My traps were rearranged into polite loops, nights bled together. My footsteps replayed in fresh mud as if the earth looped my life for practice. I carried extra batteries like talismans and stopped telling anyone because confession felt like surrender. Each failed attempt tightened the knot in my chest. Every erased recording shaved pieces from my memory, and it changed. I realized the forest was not simply home to a remnant spirit. It had become a hunter that rehearsed its prey's life, and used those rehearsals to pull others into the same pattern. And I, standing in a uniform I had earned, was slowly being rehearsed right out of myself. I told myself this would be the last time. No radio. No GPS, no batteries. I left the truck behind and took only a compass, a field map, and the stars. I moved off trail, through brush that clawed at my legs and over terrain no one bothers with, steep ridges, slick stone, sheer drops. I thought if I stayed high enough, far enough, I could outrun the pattern, outwalk the loop, but when the wind shifted and the pine scent thickened, I already knew. I crested the ridge and saw the glow, Site 46. Again. But this time, the fire was already burning. It wasn't the usual dead coals or faint embers. This was roaring, alive, like it had been waiting for me. And he was there, the man in the yellow coat standing just beyond the flame. Only now I could see his face, my face. I don't remember sitting down, but I'm by the fire now. It's warm, too warm. My boots are muddy, but I didn't walk here. And I think someone else is coming soon. Maybe they'll find the path like I did. Maybe they'll hear me calling their name. I just hope they don't answer. I shouldn't have read it. I should have burned it the second I found it. But instead I stood there, soaked to the bone, breath fogging in the cold morning air, thumbing through pages that felt more alive than they should have. I was doing a routine boundary check in North Hollow, one of the oldest, most isolated sectors of the park. That's when I saw it. A corner of leather-bound cover poking through the mud near a collapsed ranger station. The roof had long since caved in. Moss covered the walls like the place was being slowly swallowed by the forest. Curiosity got the better of me. I knelt, dug it out. The logbook was swollen from rain, pages torn and clawed at by time. Most of the ink had bled into nothing, but there were still entries, some intact, others smeared like the writer had scrawled them mid-panic. A name on the first page, Dale Merrick. Ranger ID, 3042. I told myself it was just old paperwork. A relic, but something in those pages felt wrong. Not just eerie, wrong. Like the book didn't want to be read. And yet, I kept flipping like I had no choice. That was the last peaceful day I remember. At first, it read like any other field log. Dale Merrick had been assigned to the North Hollow post in early spring, years before I ever set foot in these woods. His handwriting was neat, measured, the tone optimistic. He wrote about the quiet beauty of isolation, how the early morning fog rolled like waves through the trees, how the stars felt closer out here. He made jokes about talking to himself too much, mentioned brewing the world's worst coffee over a rusted-out stove. It felt human, familiar. I found myself liking him. He described his patrols in detail, cataloging every downed tree and fresh paw print. He was diligent, professional, but sprinkled between the mundane notes were moments, strange ones. Trail marker 14 missing again, he wrote. Replaced it. Must have been weather or some bored teens. Days later, another. Woke up to scratching on the cabin wall. Figured it was raccoons. Left some food out. Gone by morning. The deeper I read, the more these little oddities piled up. Footprints that led nowhere. A deer carcass found neatly arranged in a clearing. No blood, no drag marks. Dale tried to stay logical. He blamed coyotes, weather, kids playing pranks, but I could feel the uncertainty bleeding in. One entry hit me hard. I talked to my radio today, even though no one's called in 3 days. Just wanted to hear a voice, any voice. He joked about losing his mind, but ended the paragraph with, I hope someone reads this eventually, so I know I'm not just disappearing. His words lingered with me long after I closed the log that night. I'd been alone on patrols before. I knew the weird thoughts that crept in when the only thing talking back was the wind. Still, there was something in Dale's voice, a shift just beneath the surface, that chilled me, like he was trying to convince himself more than he was documenting reality. That night, as I lay in my bunk, logbook resting on the table, I swore I heard a faint scratching outside my cabin, just like he described. I told myself it was coincidence. Just raccoons, just the woods doing what the woods do. But I didn't sleep. Not one bit. The tone changed around page 60. Gone were the tidy paragraphs and dry observations. Dale's handwriting had shifted, shaky, cramped like he was writing in a hurry. Or under duress. The entries were shorter now, choppier. But every word buzzed with tension. There's someone in the trees, he wrote. Not someone. Not really. It moves when I move. Stops when I stop. Like a shadow with too many bones. He tried to photograph it. He mentioned setting up trail cams along the east ridge. A few days later, all the cams were turned around. Every last one. Facing the trees. Like it wanted to watch me instead. I paused when I read that. Not just because of the words, but because the page was torn at the corner, as if someone had tried to rip it out. Below the entry, faint red smudges trailed off the paper. Blood mud? I wasn't sure. The next entry spiraled fast. Dale started logging the exact time he heard it, 2:11 a.m. every night. It calls my name, he wrote. It doesn't yell. It sings it. Like it knows me. His writing grew frantic. Letters collided into each other. Whole sentences scratched out and rewritten in darker ink. Sometimes all caps. He described peeking through the cabin window and seeing eyes between the trees. Reflective. Too far apart to be human. One night he opened the door a crack and whispered, "Hello?" The reply came instantly, "Come see." After that, his notes grew paranoid. "Don't go outside," he scribbled. "Don't look at it. If you acknowledge it, it comes closer." He wrote that over and over again like a mantra, on the margins of pages, even in the back cover. The journal itself felt violated, bent, torn, water-warped, like it had suffered right alongside him. I started to wonder if I was reading the writings of a man descending into madness. Or if he really wasn't alone up there. Maybe both. His words didn't feel like fiction. They felt like someone clawing to stay sane, like someone trying to leave a map through the dark for anyone who might come after. And now, I was that someone. Dale's entries shifted from paranoia into full desperation. He tried to reach out, tried to make contact with someone, anyone. "Radio's useless," he scribbled. Static, nothing but static. "Sometimes I think I hear a voice under it, but it's not dispatch. It's him. The word him was underlined 3 times, the pen cutting so hard it nearly tore through the page. A few pages later, his tone snapped. Wrote letters. Can't send them. Mailbag gone. Who took it? The next line chilled me. I never left the cabin, but I heard the door open. Heard it close, then came the attempt to escape. His entry was almost illegible, letters slanted and frantic. Took trail west. Followed markers. Walked for hours. Came back to my cabin. How? I never turned around. The loop, the loop, the loop. He repeated the word until the ink smeared off the page, and then he started describing him. The Watcher. A man-shaped thing with hollow pits where eyes should be. Always at a distance. Never speaking. Never moving, unless Dale wasn't looking directly at it. Words eventually failed him. The pages turned into drawings, shaky sketches of trees, of the cabin, of that thing standing among the trunks. Always closer, always watching. I caught myself holding the book at arm's length like the images might leap off the page. My heart hammered. These weren't doodles from boredom. They were frantic, carved-in scrawls, the pen cutting so deep the paper tore. On one page, Dale had drawn dozens of circles where the Watcher's eyes should have been, blackened over until the sheet nearly split. Worse were the passages where Dale wrote as if he wasn't the one writing. It speaks through me, one entry said. The handwriting was jagged, foreign. It says I'm already gone. The claustrophobia crept into me as I read. Dale wasn't lost in the woods. He was trapped in some kind of impossible loop, a prison without walls. The trees were endless, but they all led back to the same door, the same cabin, the same nightmare. And as the wind pressed against the window of my own station, I couldn't shake the feeling. Maybe I'd already stepped into that same loop. The last stretch of entries felt less like reading and more like staring into someone's unraveling mind. The handwriting was almost impossible to decipher. Slanted, scrawled, gouged into the paper like he was writing with shaking hands. Words trailed off mid-thought, sentences fractured. It's inside, one line read. Boarded the doors. Can't breathe right. It's in the walls. Dale described nailing planks across the cabin windows, rationing out cans of beans, counting matches. He wrote warnings directly to me, or at least to someone. Don't listen when it calls. Don't look in its eyes. Don't. The sentence ended there, unfinished, like the pen had been ripped from his hand. After that, the entries dissolved. No more dates, just fragments. He's closer now. I talked to him tonight. He says he's always been me. The book became a tug-of-war between Dale's voice and something else. Don't open this page was written across the top margin of one entry, but beneath it the words, why not? We're the same now. Then nothing. Blank pages. A silence more terrifying than any of the chaos before it. I thought it was over, until I noticed a seam at the back cover, a flap of leather just loose enough to peel away. Inside was one final scrap of paper, folded, stained dark like it had been hidden in blood. I unfolded it with trembling hands. I had to become the Watcher. That's how it ends. That was it. No signature, no date. Just those words pressed deep into the page as though carved with desperation. I stared at them until the letters blurred. Did Dale mean he'd lost his mind and imagined the Watcher? Or had the forest taken him, reshaped him, made him into the very thing that stalked him? The logbook slipped from my grip and landed on the floor with a dull thud. But even then I couldn't shake the thought burning at the back of my mind. If Dale became the Watcher, then who had been watching him? And worse, who was watching me right now? It started 3 nights ago. At exactly 2:11 a.m., I saw something standing just beyond the tree line, still, silent, staring. Too far to make out clearly, but close enough that I felt it watching. The next night, same time, same place, same impossible stillness. I told myself it was a trick of the light, that I was tired, that I'd let Dale's words get into my head. But last night it stepped closer. The logbook's gone. I don't remember burning it, but it's not here anymore. I tore the cabin apart looking for it. Nothing. Just an empty space where it used to be, like it never existed. Sometimes I hear my name in the trees. A soft, almost affectionate whisper. I don't check anymore. I already know where it's coming from. I told myself I wouldn't go outside. But tonight, I have to see. I need to know if he's still out there or if it's me now. I'm leaving this recorder on the table. Maybe someone finds it. Maybe they don't, but if you do, if you're listening to this, don't read anything. Don't follow anything, just leave, before it sees you too. I woke up with the taste of dirt in my mouth. Cold earth pressed against my back and the scent of pine and rot filled my lungs. Above me, the trees loomed like silent giants, their branches clawing at the bruised sky. But it wasn't the forest that made my stomach twist, and it was me. Or rather, what was left of me. Lying 6 feet away was my body. Or a version of it. Clothes shredded, throat slashed open, eyes wide in a frozen scream. I've seen it so many times I've stopped counting. The same clearing, the same position, the same goddamn corpse. And every time I die, I wake up right here like the forest is pressing rewind on some sick joke. The worst part? I remember dying. I remember the blood freezing in my veins, the snapping bones, the sound of leaves crunching under something that shouldn't exist. And then, blackness. Morning comes and I'm back, breathing, whole, alive, but not for long. I don't know what this place is. Hell. A curse. A hallucination, but something's toying with me and I'm done playing along. Tonight I won't just die again. Tonight, I'm going to find out why. I took the job because I needed to disappear. After everything that happened back home, Ridgepine felt like the perfect place to vanish. Tucked deep in the Pacific Northwest, miles from the nearest town, nothing but trees and silence. The ranger station was a squat wooden outpost with dusty windows and a radio that crackled like it hadn't heard a human voice in years. The locals barely looked me in the eye when I passed through town. One old man leaned in as I filled up on gas and muttered, "That forest don't sleep." She remembers. I laughed it off. Thought he was drunk. I should have listened. The first few days were fine, strange but fine. The air had a heaviness to it, like the trees were holding their breath. My routine was simple: patrol, check cameras, report in. But on the fourth night I blinked and it was morning. No memory of sleep, no gaps in the logs, just a missing night as if time had slipped out from under me. Then came the voices, low garbled whispers over the ranger radio. Even when it was turned off, I'd hear my name. Sometimes, I'd hear myself. Not an echo, a copy. Same tone, same cadence. But it wasn't me speaking. That's when the dreams started. They were vivid, too real. I'd find myself in a forest clearing I didn't recognize, lying face up, paralyzed. The sky would darken. A figure would emerge. Always faceless, always silent. Then the pain. Cold, sharp, unrelenting. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding like I'd actually died. But here's the thing. Each night the dream picked up where it left off. Not like a memory, more like a movie on repeat, inching toward something inevitable. And worse, my body would remember bruises, scratches, a splitting headache, as if I hadn't dreamed it at all. By the end of that first week, I stopped sleeping altogether. I kept the lights on. I walked the perimeter 3 times a night. Still nothing helped. I'd gone there to disappear, but something else had already found me, and it didn't want me to leave. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the desperation to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Either way, I left the station just after midnight, flashlight in hand, boots crunching against frost-hardened soil. I wasn't following a map, I was following memory. The trees blurred past like I'd seen them 1,000 times before, though I hadn't. Not awake, and then, there it was. The clearing. Exactly as it appeared in my dreams. Oval-shaped, ringed with ash-colored stones. Silent as a grave. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped forward, heart jackhammering. That's when I saw him. Me. I froze behind a tree, too stunned to move. I was lying in the middle of the clearing, eyes wide, chest heaving. From the tree line, something stepped out. Tall. Faceless. Moving like it wasn't bound by bones or gravity. It hovered more than walked. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body locked up. The thing knelt beside the other me and reached out. What happened next wasn't violent. It was surgical, deliberate. It placed a hand on my chest and pulled. There was no blood, no mess. Just a cracking sound like splitting ice. My twin arched and went still, and then I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. The next night it happened again. Same clearing. Same scene. Same death. Only this time I could feel the pain. A cold stab behind my ribs, spreading outward like fire. I begged myself to wake up, but it didn't come until the moment my eyes went glassy. Then gasp back in bed. Alive. Night 3, the forest was louder. The trees groaned. The faceless thing came closer to where I was hiding. My own screams echoed from the clearing. I could hear my ribs breaking like twigs. It watched me die, and then turned its head toward me. Each time I woke, I felt less real, less whole. I'd find bruises that hadn't been there the day before. My fingernails cracked. My teeth ached. Time slipped. Hours vanished. The radio hissed with static even when unplugged. I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was reliving over and over, and each time, I died just a little more. I started asking questions quietly, like someone sneaks a cigarette behind a church. The woman at the bait shop blinked at me when I mentioned ridge pine. She folded her hands and said, "We don't speak its name." An old bulletin board in town had yellowed clippings. Missing hikers, strange lights, people found barefoot at dawn muttering numbers. The sheriff's deputy smiled thin and told me folklore keeps people from wandering. But folklore can be a warning and a map. They talked about a thing the old-timers called the Watcher, which sounded like a nickname until you heard how they said it. It eats what makes you you, your edges, your voice, the way your mouth moves when you swear. A miner's journal from the 20s described waking to find his reflection gone, and his wife later saying the man in their bed answered with the wrong laugh. I felt the hair on my arm stand up reading that entry under a flickering diner light. Back at the station, I began to fight back in small, stubborn ways. I carved a rune into the bark of a fir tree and marked the GPS coordinates. I hid an audio recorder in the hollow of a log. I left a Polaroid on a stump with today's date scrawled across the white. Each morning the marks blurred. The file on the recorder was blank, and the photo was a smear of green and brown. The coordinates would ping for a heartbeat, and then the tracker would report no signal. It was like the forest was erasing evidence the same way a tide erases footprints. I filmed myself next, because cameras don't lie until they do. The footage showed me in the clearing, but my face slid subtly wrong. My jaw tightened when it shouldn't. My eyes held a smoldering patience I didn't feel. At one point, my filmed self turned to the camera and smiled without the movement of the lips I remembered. Watching it back felt like watching someone who'd learned how to be me, and the mirror in the cabin started betraying me. I'd catch my reflection lagging behind, mimicking me a beat late or tilting its head when I didn't. Once it blinked after I had kept my eyes open. I stopped trusting my reflection, and worse, I stopped trusting my memory of myself. The Watcher wasn't just watching. It was practicing, right now, truly. I followed the path I'd traced in my nightmares until the trees opened into the hollowed ring of ash and stone. Moonlight poured like cold milk, and there, lit in silver, was him. Me, but not. He sat on a rock, knees drawn, hands folded like someone waiting for something that would not come. His eyes were open and empty, the skin around them too still. When he turned, the motion was precise, like a recording skipping to the correct frame. I stepped forward because I needed proof. It's one thing to see a body in a dream. It's another to watch a living copy breathe the air that should be mine. He smiled, my smile warped. My voice came from his mouth before I could stop it. "You shouldn't have come," he said in my cadence, but the warmth was gone. I tried reason. "Who are you?" I asked. The answer was a tilted head and the same smile. He didn't blink. Not once. Panic made me clumsy. I lunged with a knife I kept in my jacket, the blade whispering through the air. I wanted to end it, to stop the loop by force. The knife met flesh and resistance that felt like cutting paper. A twig snapping sound, then nothing. The copy didn't flinch. It rose smoothly and stepped back into a shadow that shouldn't have been there. Pain swallowed me. Ribs splintered. I heard my bones complain like dry wood. The imposter laughed with the cadence my laugh always had, then black. When I woke, the cabin smelled of pine and iron. My shirt was torn where I'd struck and soaked in splotches that weren't sweat. Bruises had bloomed along my arms and ribs. Each wound cataloged another failure. Teeth marks, a crescent bruise on my throat, a patch of skin that itched as if decay had begun. Every morning the injuries accumulated. Flesh stubborn, the forest refusing to let me fully heal. I bandaged myself, cleaned wounds, but stitches frayed overnight. The mirror showed me too, tired, ragged, an imitation of myself with erosion at the edges. The doppelganger hadn't just learned to be me. It was replacing me, slower and deliberate, taking the shape of my life until there'd be nothing left to wake up to. I counted marks like a ledger. Each new bruise a line item proving time was a thief and I was losing the account. I poured the gasoline in a wide circle, soaking the roots, the stones, the soil that had cradled so many versions of my corpse. My hand shook as I struck the match. For a second, nothing. Then the clearing bloomed with fire, hungry, red, cleansing. The heat bit into my skin, but I didn't move. I couldn't. This was my last move. My last prayer. The flames licked higher, devouring the tree's ancient limbs, lighting up the clearing like a stage. And that's when I saw them. In the shadows beyond the firelight stood a dozen versions of me, some older, some disfigured, some nearly skeletal, all of them staring. One stepped forward, mouth barely moving, and whispered, "We all tried." Another spoke. Then another. It always ends here. The last thing I remember is the smell of my own flesh burning, the hiss of fire meeting blood, and my scream swallowed by the roar of the blaze. Then, silence. But I didn't wake in the cabin this time. I opened my eyes to a sky the color of bruises, lying in the center of the clearing soaked in blood, my ribs already broken, my breath shallow. This time I think it's sticking. This time, I don't think I'm coming back. They called me in last minute. Said one of the rangers called out sick and they needed someone to cover an overnight watch. Easy gig, they told me. Just check in every hour, keep an eye out for fires, nothing more. The weird part? They assigned me to watch Tower 13, except I've worked this park for 2 years and there is no Tower 13. I triple-checked the ranger map pinned in the office. Towers 1 through 12 were clearly marked, but Tower 13? No mention. Still, they gave me a printed sheet with coordinates and a note. Follow the old fire road past the South Ridge. By the time I reached the base of the trail, the sun was already bleeding into the trees. No signs, no trail markers, just a narrow dirt path swallowed by overgrowth and silence. My radio had already lost signal 10 minutes ago. I should have turned back. At the trailhead stood a crooked wooden sign, the numbers 13 freshly painted in bright red. The wood beneath it was dry and splintered like it had been rotting for decades. That's when it hit me. Someone wanted this place forgotten, but recently remembered. The deeper I walked into the forest, the less the world made sense. The trail, if you could even call it that, was more memory than path. Roots twisted through the dirt like veins, branches clawed at my shoulders, and not a single bird sang. No rustling leaves, no snapping twigs, just silence. The kind of silence that presses on your eardrums like altitude. About 20 minutes in, I passed what must have once been a signpost. Shattered, its wooden arm pointing nowhere. The paint faded to ghost streaks. I kept going, though every instinct told me this wasn't right. Something about the trees felt too still, too arranged, like they were watching me. Then I heard it. A bell. Soft, distant, like it was swaying lazily in the wind. But there was no wind. I stopped listening and it came again. Ding. I scanned the woods but saw nothing. No church, no building, just trees. And yet the sound came from deeper up the path. I pressed on, faster now, trying not to think about it. Then my boot struck something hard. I knelt and pulled a small mud-covered object from the earth. It was a rusted ranger badge. My heart jolted. The name stamped on it was mine. I stared at it, numb, then snapped my head up to look behind me. Nothing. The trail behind me was empty. My radio still hissed with dead static. By the time the trees opened into a small clearing, dusk had swallowed most of the sky. Tower 13 loomed above me, taller than I'd expected, skeletal and rusting at the joints. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, vines climbing its legs like ivy strangling a corpse. But then, the light. A flicker in the upper window. Once, then again, warm yellow like an old desk lamp blinking on after years of dust. That tower was dead, but something just woke it up. Climbing the steps to Tower 13 felt like stepping into a coffin raised high above the trees. The stairs groaned under my weight, brittle with age, each creak echoing into the woods like a warning. By the time I reached the top, the last sliver of sunlight had vanished, leaving only shadows and the pale hum of the tower's flickering interior light. The inside was almost normal. Dusty, sure, but stocked with the usual ranger setup. First aid kit, logbook, two-way radio, cot, and an old rotary phone bolted to the wall. But something was off, not in your face, but subtle. The logbook entries were dated from the 1950s. Yet the ink was fresh. Names I recognized, rangers I'd seen just last week, were scrawled in shaky cursive next to dates decades old. I turned to the corkboard. Yellowed photos pinned to it showed groups of rangers smiling in uniform. My skin prickled. One of them looked exactly like my supervisor, only younger. Much younger. That's when the radio hissed to life, static first, then a voice warped and crackling like it was underwater. "Don't stay to dawn." The sound died, replaced by silence. I grabbed the receiver. "Hello? Who is this?" Nothing. I hung it up, heart thudding. Then the phone rang. One sharp, shrill brung. I jumped. It stopped after a single ring. No caller, no number. I picked up the receiver slowly. Dead silence. I turned toward the mirror above the sink and my stomach twisted. The room was reflected perfectly. The cot, the desk, the radio, but not me. I wasn't there. Just the empty room. I backed away and sat down, trying to breathe, trying to convince myself it was exhaustion, paranoia, a trick of light. I lay on the cot, fully dressed, boots on, flashlight clutched tight, forcing my eyes shut. Maybe an hour passed, maybe less. Then came the knock. A slow, deliberate thud at the base of the tower. Not an animal, not the wind. Knock, knock, knock. Each one perfectly spaced, like someone or something one was waiting to be let in. The knocking wouldn't stop. Each thud rattled up through the metal bones of the tower, vibrating the floor beneath my boots. I forced myself to the window, peering down through the dark. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But no, there was someone standing at the base of the tower, perfectly still, too tall, shoulders narrow, no lantern, no flashlight, no movement except the faint rise and fall of its chest, if it even had one. My hand shook as I reached for the radio. Before I could speak, it screamed to life with a burst of static so sharp I dropped the receiver. Through the distortion came a voice, mangled, desperate. "It's not one of us." Then the line went dead, leaving only my ragged breathing. I swallowed hard, reached for the spotlight, and swung the beam down onto the figure. The light cut through the night like a blade, illuminating it fully. My throat went dry. The thing had no face, just a smooth, pale expanse where eyes and mouth should have been. For a long, unbearable moment, it didn't move. Then slowly, impossibly slow, its head tilted upward and directly toward me. The tower groaned. Lights flickered violently overhead, buzzing like hornets. The walls trembled as though something enormous pressed against them. I stumbled back, heart slamming, bracing for the thing to climb, to tear through the stairs. But then, silence. The figure was gone, just vanished as if it had melted into the dark. I didn't sleep. Not a second. I sat rigid in the chair, flashlight aimed at the door until the sky outside began to pale. When dawn finally broke, I dared to descend the tower's steps. My boots hit the ground and I froze. The front door, the heavy steel hatch at the tower's base, was gouged with marks. Deep, jagged claw lines carved straight through the metal. On the inside, I couldn't stay another night. As soon as daylight broke, I packed my gear and hit the trail. The forest felt heavier now, like the trees leaned closer, their branches arching to block the sky. I walked fast, pushing through brush, following what should have been the fire road back toward the ranger station. But after an hour, I spotted it again, the crooked wooden sign with the freshly painted 13. My stomach dropped. I had looped back to the base of the same cursed trail. I tried again. Different direction, compass in hand. North, then west, then straight through the undergrowth where no path existed. Hours later, sweat burning my eyes, I stumbled into a clearing. Tower 13 stood above me, waiting. No matter where I went, it dragged me back. Defeated, I climbed the tower again, slamming the door behind me. That's when I noticed the loose plank in the floorboards. I pried it up, expecting mold or rats, but instead found a leather-bound journal. My breath caught. The name on the inside cover was mine. Hands trembling, I flipped through the pages. The entries were frantic, written in my handwriting, but dated years apart. They spoke of being trapped, of the forest twisting itself into a maze, of nights spent watching the faceless figure. Again and again, the same line appeared. "The mimic is waiting." Notes warned that it wasn't just some spirit. It copied rangers, wore their names, their faces until no one remembered the difference. The last page ended mid-sentence. If you see it behind you, the rest was torn out. I set the journal down and looked toward the cracked mirror above the desk. My reflection stared back pale, hollow-eyed, but I wasn't alone. Behind me in the glass a shape loomed, tall, motionless, faceless. I spun around. The room was empty. The mirror, though, still showed it standing there. Closer. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed the chair and hurled it at the mirror. Glass exploded across the floor in 1,000 sharp fragments, each one reflecting a different part of that thing behind me. I tore the place apart next, flipped the desk, smashed the radio, lit every paper I could find. When the flames caught the curtains, I didn't stop. I poured fuel from the emergency canister and let it all burn. As the fire climbed the walls, a sound rose from the forest, a scream, high and inhuman, echoing through the trees like metal being torn in half. I stood in the tower's center, watching it all collapse around me, convinced that maybe this was the only way out. Then I heard it, the unmistakable chop of helicopter blades overhead. Relief surged. I stumbled outside, waving, yelling for help, but there was no helicopter. Just the sound and then black. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the cot. Tower intact, air still, nothing burned. The radio crackled beside me. New ranger assigned to Tower 13, name. My name. They say there is no Tower 13, and they're right, there isn't, until someone walks in. They told me I'd get used to the silence out here, that after enough years as a ranger, the wind between the pines and the distant hoot of an owl would start to feel like home, but I never got used to the voices. It was late October when it happened. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air had that sharp bite like the forest was holding its breath. I was alone at the Whispering Ridge lookout, just me, a dying fire, and the low crackle of the ranger radio. Then it came through. Help. Please, someone. A woman's voice, faint and ragged. My blood turned cold. Identify yourself, I said, leaning in. Silence. Then Emily Reyes, I'm lost. I don't know where I am. I dropped the radio. My chest went tight. Emily Reyes had been declared dead 3 weeks ago. We found her pack. Her torn jacket. A bloodied scarf. We held a damn memorial. But that night she called for help. I've seen storms, wild animals, even bodies. Nothing shook me like that. There's something in these woods that listens, learns, and then uses your voice like a puppet on a string. And it's still out there. I've walked these trails more times than I can count. Boots crunching old pine needles. Pack creaking with each step. Map tucked into my chest pocket like a heartbeat. Most people think park rangers just sit in towers and wave at tourists. They don't know about the solo patrols. The long treks through terrain so deep and wild. Your compass is your only friend. It was supposed to be a standard 5-day sweep through the northwest backcountry. Check the old fire roads. Scan for downed trees, look for signs of poachers. The kind of thing I could do half asleep. But the minute I crossed into the dense corridor near Whispering Ridge, the air changed. No birdsong. No rustling. Just this unnatural stillness, like the trees were eavesdropping. Whispering Ridge. The name makes rookies laugh until they spend a night near it. Every ranger hears the stories. Radios glitching. Phantom voices. People saying they heard someone calling their name from the woods even when they were alone. You learn to ignore it. Write it off as wind or stress or old ghost stories passed around the campfire. But the disappearances, those are harder to explain. Over the years, there have been a few, not many, but enough to make you notice a pattern. Fit hikers, experienced, well-prepared. They'd check in at the main station, take the trail west, and then nothing. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading off trail, no gear left behind. Just a quiet vanishing act. Every time the last known location was somewhere near the ridge, I remember the briefings. Unfortunate accidents, they'd say. Likely got lost, maybe a fall. But I've been on those trails. I've seen where they disappeared. No cliffs, no ravines, just thick woods and silence that hums like a tuning fork in your teeth. The last one was a guy named Daniel Holtz. He was a former Army medic, tough as nails. He radioed in from the ridge, routine check-in, nothing strange. Next morning, gone. His tent zipped, gear untouched like he evaporated into the trees. We searched for 8 days, never found so much as a shoelace. So yeah, when I got the order to patrol that same route again, I didn't laugh. I packed extra batteries, loaded the flare gun, and tried not to think about the voices. The second night out, I set up camp just north of Whispering Ridge. The sun went down fast, swallowed by the trees. Temperature dropped even faster. I lit a small fire, cooked a dehydrated stew, and tried to distract myself with my field journal. Just routine notes, wildlife sightings, terrain conditions. But every time I looked up, the forest felt closer. Around midnight, the wind died completely. No cracking branches. No distant owl. Just the hiss of my radio spitting occasional static like it was struggling to speak. Then I heard it. "Help. Please." A voice, weak, female. I froze. Turned the volume up.
Say again?
"Who is this?" The static thickened. Then Emily Reyes. I'm lost. "Can anyone hear me?" My mouth went dry. I knew that name too well. 3 weeks ago, Emily Reyes went missing with her fiancé on a weekend hike. We found bloodied scraps of her coat. Her fiancé's body half-eaten down a ravine. No sign of her except a shredded bootlace and hair. They ruled her dead. I went to her memorial. "Emily, where are you?" I asked, voice shaking. "Nothing." I stayed up the rest of the night, rifle on my lap, eyes locked on the shadows beyond the tent flap. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, some twisted radio interference, maybe a sick joke from a hunter with a scanner. But deep down, I already knew better. At dawn, I stepped out into a fresh layer of snow. No animal tracks. No boot prints. Just mine circling the camp like a paranoid sentinel. Then I saw it, half buried under a patch of frost near the tree line. Maybe 300 feet out, a boot. Women's hiking boot. Size 7, same brand and model Emily had worn. I'd seen the photos in her file. I walked out to it slowly, legs heavy. There were no prints around it. Nothing to suggest how it got there. Just one boot, laces frayed, crusted with what looked like dried mud and something darker. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, cold sweat on my back, realizing something no part of my training ever prepared me for. Emily Reyes was dead. So what the hell had I heard last night? Something shifted after I found that boot. The forest, whatever was left of its normal rhythm, started to unravel. Birdsong vanished completely. Even squirrels, chipmunks, all the little noises that usually fill the silence. Gone. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow. Like the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting. And then the echoes started. At first, I didn't notice. Just figured my voice was bouncing off the trees when I radioed in or muttered to myself. But it was too crisp. Too delayed. I'd say something. Trail looks clear up ahead. And 5-6 seconds later, I'd hear it again. Same words. Same cadence, but coming from behind me. Once I stopped mid-sentence and whispered, "What are you?" A whisper came back. My voice answering, "What are you?" I didn't talk aloud after that. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the tent, wrapped in my bag, gripping the flare gun like it was a crucifix. The fire outside had died. Wind rattled the nylon walls. Then I heard it, my own voice. "Hey," it said, cheerful. "Open up, it's me." I didn't move. I couldn't. The voice was perfect. Same pitch, same cadence. But it felt wrong, hollow, like someone wearing my voice like a mask. "Come on," it said again. "Just open the flap." I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared into the dark and prayed morning would come. Eventually it did. I unzipped the tent slowly, half expecting to find myself staring back. But no one was there. No prints. No broken branches. Just that impossible silence and a single object sitting beside the cold fire pit. My water canister was gone, and in its place lay something I hadn't seen in years. A crushed, mold-covered park ranger badge, my name barely legible beneath the corrosion. Ranger Jacob Thorne. I stared at it, heart pounding, throat dry. I still had my badge in my jacket. I checked. It was there, intact, clean. So what the hell was this? I didn't touch it. I just packed up my gear with shaking hands and told myself to keep moving. But I knew then, the forest wasn't just listening anymore. It was talking back. I should have turned back. I knew that. Every instinct screamed at me to radio for evac, claim a twisted ankle, fake a bear sighting, anything to get out. But something pulled me forward. Not curiosity, not duty. Something else. Like the ridge itself had reached into my chest and hooked its claws behind my heart. So I kept walking. I started recording. Just audio. The microphone clipped to my shoulder strap picked up everything, or so I thought. But when I played it back later, my voice was always warped, slowed, or absent entirely. That afternoon, clouds rolled in like bruises across the sky. I hiked deeper into the ridge, past territory even veteran rangers avoided. The air felt thick, soupy. My ears rang with pressure like I was underwater. And then I saw it. Across a shallow ravine stood a figure in a ranger's uniform. Stiff. Wrong. The limbs moved with a twitchy, unnatural rhythm like bad CGI. I couldn't see its face, just a void where the head should be, blurred by shadow. "Hey," I called out, voice cracking. It stopped. Then it spoke, not in one voice. "In many. Help me," sobbed a woman, Emily's voice then. "We're lost." A man I recognized from a past missing case. Then, a child's whimper. "Where's my mom?" It was cycling through them like a radio dial, rapid fire, each tone more desperate than the last. Then it found mine. A shriek tore through the trees. My own voice, screaming in raw panic. "Run! Run!" That broke me. I turned and bolted, crashing through the underbrush like a hunted animal. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed distance. But the thing followed. I could hear it, my voice, getting closer, howling in agony. Somehow I found a narrow crevice between two slabs of rock and wedged myself inside, chest heaving, limbs cramping. I pressed a hand over my mouth, trembling, listening to footsteps circling, then silence. Total, crushing silence. I stayed wedged there all night, knees pressed to my chest, praying whatever it was wouldn't find me, or worse, wouldn't become me. The sun rose like a mercy. I crawled out slowly, every inch of me sore, and kept moving. But I knew now I wasn't alone, and I hadn't been for days. I never told the full story in my report. Just the facts they'd accept: equipment malfunction, strange weather, fatigue. I left out the voices. The mimic. The thing in the trees. If I'd told the truth, they would have taken my badge and sent me for evaluation, so I kept quiet. I finished my patrol, turned in my gear, and transferred to a station far from Whispering Ridge. That was years ago, but I never really left it behind. Now I live alone in a cabin just outside the park's edge. No neighbors, no visitors, just me, the trees, and the radio. Sometimes late at night it crackles to life, not static speech, and it's always the same thing, my own voice repeating something I said the day before. Word for word, same tone, same timing. Last week it said, "I think I'm finally safe out here." The next night, "Safe out here." And last night, it laughed. I don't know if it followed me, or if it was never part of the forest at all, just something that found me when I was alone. But if you're ever out there, and you hear your own voice calling you back, don't answer. It already knows your name. I've never lost a camper in 14 years, not once. I've dealt with broken ankles, bear scares, even one guy who tried to hike barefoot and got halfway up a ravine before crying for help. But no one's ever just vanished, at least not until last fall. It was late in the season, a week before we shut the place down for winter. Pine Bluff National Park was quiet, the kind of quiet that sinks into your bones. I was manning the station alone, same as every year. Routine, familiar, safe. Then they showed up, 3 of them. A guy, a girl, and another man who never said a word. They rolled up just past dusk, asked for a site, said they wanted somewhere off-grid. Something about them felt off, not dangerous, just wrong. But I handed them a map, marked Site 9, and logged their visit like I always did. At least I thought I did. That night, something gnawed at me. Hours later, I flipped through the logbook just to check. Their names weren't there, no entry, no signature, no trace. And in that moment, a chill settled deep into my chest. Because Site 9 had been closed for years. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over Pine Bluff once summer ends. No crackling campfires, no kids shouting across the lake. Just the wind through pine needles and the occasional groan of a tree shifting in the soil. On weekdays, I might go 12 hours without hearing another voice. I liked it that way, and usually, that day had been uneventful. I spent most of it refueling the generator, logging trail markers, and sipping lukewarm coffee on the porch of the ranger station. Dusk was settling in, and clouds were starting to pile up on the horizon, heavy and gray. I remember thinking we were in for a nasty storm. That's when the van pulled up, old model silver with one busted headlight. It came crawling up the dirt path, crunching gravel like it was being careful not to wake the woods. Out stepped 3 people, a young couple, early 20s maybe, and a third guy who hung back, hands in his pockets, eyes never leaving the tree line. Looking for a place to pitch for the night, the woman said. Something quiet, no reservation. No ID, they paid in cash. Their names were mumbled, barely audible, and when I asked how long they planned to stay, the boyfriend shrugged. Just one night. They didn't have proper gear. No heavy packs, no cooler, not even flashlights that I could see. I should have turned them away, but something in the way they stared, past me, past the station, like they were already somewhere else, made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I marked off Site 9. It hadn't been used in years, tucked far back near the old growth where cell signals died, and even the birds got quiet. They didn't say thank you. Just took the map and walked. I watched them go, squinting through the thickening dusk. They didn't talk to each other. Didn't joke, didn't bicker. Just moved in sync, side by side, barely rustling the underbrush as they vanished into the trees. They moved like shadows, too quiet for how thick the brush was. That night, the storm rolled in like a freight train. Lightning split the sky above the ridge, thunder shook the cabin walls, and just before midnight I looked out toward Site 9 and saw lights, flickering deep in the woods. Not lightning, not flashlights, something else. The morning came slow and heavy, wrapped in a cold fog that clung to the trees like cobwebs. Everything was muffled. The birds, the breeze, even the usual creak of the ranger station felt quieter than it should have. I stood on the porch with my coffee, staring out into the pale gray, feeling something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just unease. It was like the park was holding its breath. Juno, my black lab, was already whining at the door. Usually she was eager for our morning loop through the campsites, but that day, she wouldn't budge past the base of the hill. I tried calling her, whistling. She just sat there, ears low, eyes locked toward the trees. Toward Site 9 I drove up alone. The trail was muddy from the storm, but untouched. No tire tracks, no footprints. When I reached Site 9, it was exactly as it had been before I assigned it. Clean, untouched, like no one had ever stepped foot there. No tent poles, no flattened grass, not even the imprint of a boot. Nothing. I crouched down, ran my hand through the soil. It was dry underneath. No fire pit, no cigarette butts, not a single broken branch, just perfect, eerie stillness. Back at the station, my hands were shaking. I grabbed the logbook and flipped to the previous night. Blank. No entry under that date. No names. My own handwriting stopped with the hiker from the afternoon. No mention of the 3 I'd sworn I'd checked in. I turned to the CCTV screen. I keep an old camera pointed at the front gate, half out of habit. I scrolled back to the time they arrived. Static. The feed glitched, flickered violently, then cut to black. It stayed that way for exactly 4 hours. I picked up the phone, heart pounding now, and called the state office in Fairbanks. "Hey, just confirming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you have any record of 3 walk-in campers last night? Young couple and a third man?" There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end answered, calm as ever. "No walk-ins logged anywhere. You were the only active ranger last night." I couldn't sleep after that call. My mind kept circling the same question. Who were they? I knew I hadn't imagined them. I felt them. I spoke to them. Yet the forest, the footage, the records, all said otherwise. By noon, I drove out to the park's storage barn, an old timber structure with warped steps and rusting hinges. Inside, past rows of cracked equipment and moldy boxes, was the archive room. It hadn't been touched in years. Dust clung to every file like moss. I pulled the binder labeled Incidents 1960-1980. Something in my gut told me to start there. Page after page of wildlife reports. Lost dogs, a few missing persons. Then I found it October 12, 1973. 3 campers, a young couple and a third man. Last seen at Site 9, never found. Their vehicle abandoned near the edge of the forest. No gear, no trace. Closed case. My hands were trembling. It was too precise. Too exact. I drove straight to Fairbanks that evening and met with Judith, the park historian. When I told her what I'd read, she went pale. Site 9 wasn't just closed, she said quietly. It was sealed. After the disappearances, a tribal elder warned us. Said the forest remembers, and sometimes it calls people back. I asked her what that meant. She hesitated, then told me an old Inupiaq tale. The Forgotten Three. Spirits who died lost in the woods, doomed to repeat their final night. They lure others in, make them see, make them feel, until they join them. That night, back at my cabin, the air felt wrong. The kind of cold that seeps through windows even when the fire's roaring. Then came the footsteps. Soft at first, gravel shifting under slow dragging weight. Circling the station, Juno sat bolt upright and growled low. I killed the lights. Outside, the fog was thick, swallowing the trees. But just past the edge, barely visible, 3 silhouettes stood motionless, facing the cabin, unmoving, watching. I stepped back from the window. Then from the dark, a voice whispered my name. Not a shout, not a question, a whisper. You brought us back. I wasn't going to wait for them to come back. Whatever they were, they'd crossed into my world, and I needed to face them on theirs. Before I left, I opened the drawer my grandfather's things had been stashed in. He'd been a ranger too, stationed at Pine Bluff back in the 70s. Retired early after a breakdown no one would explain. I found his leather-bound field journal, brittle with age. Scrawled on the inside cover were just 5 words. Don't go near Site 9. I went anyway. Flashlight, flare gun, and journal in my pack. Juno wouldn't come no matter how I begged. I left her behind, trembling under the desk. The trail to Site 9 felt wrong. Trees shifted when I wasn't looking. Distances stretched and shrank as if the path was breathing. I swear the moon blinked. The clearing looked normal at first. But the air was thick and metallic, and half buried in the soil were rotted tents, tangled zippers, and sleeping bags eaten by mold. Time had knotted itself here. Then I saw her. A woman crawling from the earth, half-burned, eyes wide with panic. Don't let them take you like they took me. Suddenly I was sitting by a fire, but I wasn't me. I was young again. Maybe 19. The smoke, the voices, the laughter. All too familiar. A forgotten memory dug up and replayed. The same 3 campers were there, but now their faces peeled back with each flicker of flame. Hollow cheeks, black eyes, jaws slack with a soundless scream. They turned to me in unison. You brought us back. I reached for my flare gun and fired into the sky. The red light cut through the dark like a blade. And for a breathless moment I saw them. The original 3. Not phantoms. Not tricks, just kids. Frozen in the firelight. Sad. Broken. And then, they crumbled into ash. The forest let go of its grip. I collapsed, gasping, the taste of smoke in my throat. Lying there in the dirt, I saw something glint beside me. An old ranger badge. My grandfather's. I clutched it tight, heart hammering as the woods went still and the silence felt like it was listening. I woke up on the floor of the ranger station, face pressed against cold tile, the taste of dirt still on my tongue. The fire had burned low. Juno was curled beside me, eyes wide, ears flat. She hadn't moved all night. It was morning. Crisp, clear. Birds chirping like nothing had happened. A knock at the door startled me. It was Kyle, the new seasonal recruit. Hey, he said, hesitant. HQ called. They're shutting the park early this year. Too many weird reports. Hikers getting lost. Lights in the woods. I nodded numb. Packing didn't take long. Just gear and files. Before I left, I did one last sweep of the station. I don't know what drew me back to the logbook, but I opened it anyway. There they were, 3 names. Neat handwriting. My handwriting, dated 2 nights ago. I stared at the page until the letters started to blur. I didn't remember writing them, but somehow I knew I had. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, soft like a breath against my neck. I stepped out, locked the cabin behind me, and whispered into the woods. If I ever let them in, don't let me come back. And then I walked away. I should have never stepped off the map. That decision, it wasn't just a mistake. It was an unraveling. A slow, deliberate invitation into something I should have never seen. I've been a park ranger for almost a decade. These woods, they're stitched into my memory like scars. Every trail, every bend, every rusted mile marker. I know them like I know my own heartbeat. But that morning was different. I was doing a routine sweep, nothing unusual. Quiet. Calm. The forest breathing in its usual rhythm. Then I saw it, a trail, narrow, freshly carved between 2 old pines. It wasn't there yesterday. I was sure of it. No animal tracks, no wind damage, just clean, soft earth like it had been placed there on purpose. The strange part? It didn't feel wrong. Not yet, it felt curious. Like it was waiting for me. And something in me, some irrational pull, stepped forward. I told myself I'd go just a little ways in. Just enough to mark it down, log it properly. But even then, something in my gut screamed. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. And the forest I knew, the one I trusted, began to change. It was just after sunrise when I saw it again. The trail. Still there, still just as fresh as the day before. I stood in front of it, boots planted in the dew-soaked grass, staring at the way it cut unnaturally between two old-growth pines like a wound in the forest. There were no signs, no markers, no tire tracks or boot prints, just raw, untouched dirt. That wasn't normal. Nothing goes untracked out here. Standard protocol kicked in. I snapped a few photos, logged the GPS coordinates, and checked the map on my handheld. Nothing. I double-checked the satellite overlay. Still nothing. It was like the trail had appeared out of nowhere, and the forest was pretending it had always been there. I radioed base. "Hey, dispatch. Do we have any trail maintenance logged for Quadrant 9? A crackle, then a pause. "Negative. That area's been untouched for months. No patrols scheduled. You sure you're in the right sector?" "Positive. Well, log it, but don't go too far in. Might just be erosion or runoff, but this wasn't erosion. The trail was too deliberate, too clean. And despite what protocol said, I was already taking the first step. Almost immediately, something felt off. The normal sounds of the woods, chirping, rustling, distant squirrel chatter, all faded behind me like a door closing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The air grew colder, damper, heavy like fog, but without the mist. About 30 yards in, I spotted deep claw marks gouged into the bark of a cedar tree. They started high, too high. Whatever made them had to be at least 7 feet tall. Bare, maybe, but they weren't curved. They looked wrong. I knelt down, brushed a hand across the marks. The wood splintered easily, like the wound was fresh. That's when I saw it. Embedded halfway into the trunk of a birch, half swallowed by decades of growth, was a metal ranger badge. Old, weather-worn. The enamel chipped. My stomach turned when I wiped away the grime. The name had been deliberately scratched out. Not faded, destroyed. It wasn't just a trail. It was a breadcrumb, and I had already followed it too far. The trail opened into a clearing I swear I'd never seen, not once in all my years of patrol. The trees pulled back like curtains, revealing a weathered wooden cabin squatting low in the grass, half-eaten by rot and ivy. The structure looked abandoned, but not empty. Fresh footprints marked the dirt leading up to the porch. Boot prints just like mine. And there was smoke, faint but unmistakable, curling from a rusted chimney like a fading exhale. I scanned the area. No wildlife, no sound. Even the wind refused to move here. My hand hovered over my sidearm. I took a cautious step forward, then another. The porch groaned under my weight. The front door, crooked on one hinge, swung open before I could touch it. Inside was wrong. It looked like an old ranger outpost, wooden desk, logbooks, lanterns, but everything was decades out of place. Dusty canteens, canvas packs, even a rotary radio set. A thick layer of time clung to it all. Maps were pinned to the walls, but they didn't match anything I recognized. Trails I knew were missing. Entire zones erased. And in their place, looping paths. Circular. Repeating. I spotted a journal, lying open on the desk, pages curled with age. The name inside was handwritten, Hal McCready, Senior Ranger. Each entry was shakier than the last. I walked it again today. The trail resets. Always begins at the same pines. Always ends at the cabin. I can't leave anymore. The cabin changes when I look away. Photos move. Furniture rots, then repairs itself. I think it's watching me. There's something else on the trail. It mimics, waits. I think it wants to be me. My stomach clenched. I reached for my radio, flicked it on. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Khan. I need immediate assistance in sector unstatic." Then a crackling voice that wasn't mine whispered, "Don't let it follow you back." I froze. "Hello? Who is this?" Silence. I backed away from the desk. The journal slammed shut on its own. Something creaked behind me. I spun, nothing, and yet I knew I wasn't alone. This wasn't a shelter, it was a trap. I burst out of the cabin, heart pounding in my throat. The clearing looked the same, but not quite. The trees leaned in closer like they'd shifted position while I was inside. The sky above had dimmed, clouds thick and low like a storm was rolling in. But the forecast had been clear. I was sure of it. I tried to retrace my steps. Same pace, same direction, back toward the 2 pines. But the trail twisted in a way it hadn't before. Branches closed off old paths, and what should have been familiar turns now led to nowhere. Within minutes, I was standing in front of a fallen log, oddly shaped, moss-covered. Something about it felt familiar. I kept moving. 10 more minutes. Fallen log again, the same log. I circled back, tried a different direction. 20 minutes this time, maybe more. The trees thinned. I thought I was making progress until I saw the same damn log. Same split in the bark, same cluster of mushrooms at the base. My compass spun uselessly in my hand. North changed with every step. And the light. God, the light, it was vanishing too fast. Dusk was swallowing the forest. Then came the sound. Twigs snapping. Slow, deliberate, something circling just beyond my view. I froze, every muscle in my body tightening. I called out, but my voice felt too loud, too real for this dreamlike place. That's when I saw it. Ahead, between the trees, a figure tall, rigid, dressed like me, uniform gear, even my backpack. But its movements were wrong. Off sync, like a puppet trying to remember how to be human. It tilted its head in perfect time with mine. I ran. Branches whipped across my face, roots caught my boots, breath heaving. But I didn't stop. I didn't dare look back. And when I finally saw the cabin again through the trees, I thought I'd made it. Only, it had changed. The wood was darker, rotted through. The windows were cracked. The door hung off one hinge. I stepped inside. The journal was gone. Photos on the wall were smeared, warped. But one image caught my eye. It was me. Pressed against the cabin's window. Mouth open in a silent scream. From the inside. I slammed the cabin door shut and shoved the desk in front of it, heart hammering like it was trying to punch through my chest. Outside, the last of the light drained from the clearing. Night fell fast, too fast. I could barely see past the windows, but I didn't need to. I could hear it. Clicks, like insect legs tapping wood. Then groans. Long, stretched sounds that didn't belong to any animal I knew. And worst of all, my own voice, Ranger Khan. "Come out," it said, playful, broken, like a recording left in the rain. I stumbled back, grabbing the lantern. My hand brushed against the journal again. Not Hal's. This one was older, the leather cover cracked, the pages brittle. One entry stood out. Scrawled, desperate, it copies, it learns. It waits until you're too tired to tell who's who. I dropped the book. A shape moved past the window, low to the ground, crawling. I caught a glimpse of fabric. Olive green, just like my uniform. The thing rose up, bones cracking like dry sticks, and stood in silhouette. It wore my clothes, my boots, my face, though I couldn't see the features, just the outline. Blurred, shifting. It tapped once on the door, then again, then Abdullah. It said my name. I couldn't breathe. I crouched behind the desk, silent, willing my heartbeat to slow. But something in me cracked. A tremble, a flinch, too loud. The doorknob twisted. I ran, through the back, into the blackened woods. The trees twisted like they'd been rearranged by hand. Branches curled inward like claws. My flashlight flickered, then cut out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. I stumbled forward, gasping, tripping on roots that weren't there before. The forest groaned around me like it was alive. Breathing, watching. Something scraped behind me, fast, erratic. I fell hard, crashing to the ground. My radio clipped off my belt, skidding away and cracking open. I grabbed it, desperate, pressing the transmit button. "Dispatch! Please, anyone, I need help. There's something out here." Static, then a voice, familiar, hollow. "You brought it back." The radio died in my hands, and the forest went silent. I came to lying face down in the gravel behind the ranger station. Skin scraped raw, uniform torn, throat dry as bone. My watch was dead. My radio shattered. 12 hours had passed, they told me. I had no memory of getting back, just darkness and that voice. They said I was probably dehydrated, disoriented. Trail sickness, one of the new recruits called it, trying to sound like he knew what he was talking about. But there's no sickness that explains what I saw, or what I felt. I pulled up the GPS logs, nothing, no trail, no clearing, no cabin, like it had never existed. I told them I got turned around in a storm, that I lost track of time. They nodded. They believed me, but something came back with me. I know it. A week later, a pair of hikers reported seeing another ranger, tall, wearing my exact uniform, just off trail near the old pines. Said he moved strange, didn't respond when they waved. Just turned and walked into the woods. I checked the security footage that night. At 3:04 a.m., I saw myself standing at the tree line still, watching. I've said nothing. Some trails are made to trap something in, and some fools like me walk right in and open the door.